My parents actually thought it was a good idea to give my $600,000 renovated home to my brother after he burned his own house down. They claimed he had lost everything, and that because I was single and successful, I needed to take the hit for the family. So, I didn't scream. I didn't fight them. I just handed over the keys. What they didn't know is that they had just walked right into a massive, legally binding trap. I hit them with a debt notice that completely destroyed their lives. Here is how it all went down. I am 32 years old, and I run my own independent commercial construction company. For the past 3 weeks, I had been living out of a suitcase in a bland, heavily air-conditioned hotel room in Dallas, Texas. I was overseeing the final structural framing on a massive retail complex. The days were brutal. We were dealing with a record-breaking heat wave, supply chain delays, and subcontractors who seemed to magically forget how to read a blueprint the second I turned my back. By the time I crashed into my hotel bed each night, my body felt like it had been hit by a freight train. It was exactly 3:15 in the morning when my phone started vibrating violently against the cheap wooden nightstand. I groaned, rubbing my eyes, and grabbed the device. The caller ID flashed my mother's name. Penelope. My heart did a quick, heavy thump. A call at 3 in the morning from a parent usually means someone is dead or in the hospital. I sat up, cleared the sleep from my throat, and answered. Before I could even say hello, my mother's voice came bursting through the speaker, hysterical and out of breath. She was sobbing so hard I could barely make out the words. She kept repeating my older brother's name. Wyatt. Wyatt is 35. And to truly understand the dynamic of my family, you need to understand who Wyatt is. If I was the reliable, invisible workhorse of the family, Wyatt was the golden calf. He was the charming, athletic, outgoing son who always needed a little extra help, a little extra money, and a little extra grace. I learned very early on that my parents' love was a finite resource and Wyatt held the monopoly. I tried to get my mother to slow down. I asked her point blank if Wyatt was hurt. She took a ragged breath. She told me he wasn't hurt, but his house was gone. Completely burned to the ground. I asked her what happened. Was it an electrical fault? A gas leak? No. It was Wyatt. My mother, making her usual endless stream of excuses, explained that he had been going through a really stressful time at his mid-level sales job. He had gone to a bar, drank way too much, come home, and decided to smoke a cigarette in bed. He passed out. The mattress caught fire. By the time the smoke alarms woke him up, the entire second floor was engulfed in flames. He barely made it out alive with nothing but the clothes on his back and a few boxes of random junk he managed to grab from the garage. My mother was crying, telling me how devastated he was, how he had lost all his beautiful furniture and his expensive clothes. She told me he was currently sitting on her living room couch in total shock, weeping like a child. I sat there in the dark hotel room, listening to her cry over a 35-year-old man who nearly killed himself through sheer, irresponsible stupidity. I didn't feel a surge of panic. I didn't feel the urge to weep with her. I just felt exhausted. It was always something with Wyatt. Always a disaster waiting to be cleaned up by someone else. I kept my voice calm, professional, and detached. I told her I was glad he was alive. I told her I would book the first flight back to Seattle in the morning. She thanked me profusely, calling me her rock, the reliable one. She hung up, and I threw my phone back onto the nightstand. I stared at the dark ceiling for a long time, knowing deep down that this fire was going to cost me something. I just didn't know how much. The flight from Dallas to Seattle took just over 4 hours, but suspended in that pressurized cabin, it felt like an eternity. I had the window seat, watching the dry Texas landscape shift into the green, mountainous terrain of the Pacific Northwest. I had a lot of time to think, and my mind kept drifting back to the long, bitter history I shared with my parents, Penelope and Vincent. Growing up, the rules in our house were entirely unspoken, but completely understood. Wyatt's mistakes were treated as tragic accidents that required family unity to fix. My mistakes were treated as personal moral failures. When Wyatt was 18, he got a DUI and crashed my father's car into a neighbor's retaining wall. My parents didn't punish him. They didn't make him get a job to pay for the damages. Instead, they quietly emptied the college savings account they had been building for me since I was a baby. They used my tuition money to hire a premium defense attorney to keep Wyatt out of jail and to settle the property damage out of court. When I found out about it 2 years later, right as I was applying to engineering schools, my father just patted my shoulder and told me I was smart and capable. He said I could easily get student loans, but Wyatt needed a clean record to succeed in life. That was the exact moment I realized I was entirely on my own. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I went out, got a job doing heavy manual labor on construction sites, and worked 70 hours a week to pay my own way through a civil engineering degree. I built my life brick by brick, entirely without their help. And the crown jewel of that life was my house. 2 years ago, I bought a derelict, abandoned Victorian house in a quiet, affluent suburb of Seattle. The roof was caving in, the plumbing was a total disaster, and the foundation needed serious reinforcement. Nobody wanted it. But with my engineering background, I saw the raw potential. I purchased the property under my construction company's name for tax purposes and liability protection, and I spent 2 agonizing, back-breaking years bringing it back to life. I poured my heart, my sweat, and hundreds of thousands of dollars into that property. I ripped out the rotting floors and installed premium, 3/4-inch thick solid Brazilian walnut planks. I gutted the tiny, outdated kitchen and built a massive, modern culinary masterpiece with custom-poured white concrete countertops and high-end stainless steel appliances. I restored the original stained glass windows and upgraded all the wiring to support a state-of-the-art smart home security system. By the time I was finished, the house was a fortress of modern luxury wrapped in a historic shell. Real estate agents told me the current market value was easily over $600,000. It wasn't just a house. It was the physical proof that I was better than the hand I was dealt. It was my sanctuary. As the plane touched down on the tarmac in Seattle, I felt a deep, nagging sense of dread in the pit of my stomach. I turned my phone off airplane mode. There were no new texts from my mother. No updates on Wyatt. Just radio silence. I got my luggage, grabbed a coffee from the terminal, and took a cab straight to my house. The weather was crisp and gray, a typical Seattle afternoon. I just wanted to drop my bags, take a long, hot shower in my custom walk-in stone bathroom, and then drive over to my parents' apartment to figure out what to do with my idiot brother. I had no idea that my sanctuary had already been breached. The cab dropped me off at the end of my long driveway. The house looked beautiful against the overcast sky, the dark gray exterior paint contrasting perfectly with the crisp white trim. I walked up the wide wooden front porch, dragging my heavy rolling suitcase behind me. I stopped in front of the heavy, solid oak front door. I reached out and tapped the glass screen of my high-end smart lock. It illuminated, waiting for my fingerprint. I pressed my thumb against the sensor. The lock blinked red. A small digital text flashed across the screen, access denied. Master override active. I stopped breathing for a second. I am a contractor. I wired this house myself. I know exactly how this system works. A master override doesn't happen because of a glitch. A master override happens when someone uses the physical, laser-cut emergency backup key to manually open the deadbolt and then uses the interior control panel to wipe the digital access rights. There was only one physical backup key in existence. I had sealed it in a thick envelope and placed it inside my father's heavy iron floor safe 3 years ago, explicitly instructing him that it was only to be used if I was ever in a severe medical coma or legally missing. I didn't panic. I just reached into my jacket, pulled out my master set of contractor keys, and used my own physical key to unlock the door. I pushed the heavy oak door open and stepped inside. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It was a thick, repulsive mixture of stale cigarette smoke, wet ash, and cheap cologne. It was the exact smell of a dive bar at closing time. I walked into the grand entryway, my boots echoing loudly on the Brazilian walnut floors. The place was a disaster zone. There were massive black plastic garbage bags piled against the pristine white walls. Cardboard boxes overflowing with soot-stained clothes and random junk were scattered across the floor, leaving dirty scuff marks on the expensive wood. I walked slowly into the main living room. And there he was. Wyatt. He was sprawled out comfortably on my custom Italian leather sofa, his dirty sneakers resting casually on my glass coffee table. He was wearing a pair of my gray sweatpants and one of my expensive thermal shirts, clearly having raided my bedroom closet. He was holding a beer in one hand and flipping through the channels on my massive flat-screen television with the other. I heard footsteps coming from my kitchen. My mother, Penelope, walked out holding a stack of my dinner plates, followed closely by my father, Vincent, who was carrying a box of Wyatt's salvaged kitchen supplies. They all froze when they saw me standing there. Wyatt didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. He just took a slow sip of his beer, gave me a lazy wave, and said, "Hey, little brother. Good to see you. Man, this couch is incredible." I looked from Wyatt to my mother to my father. I looked at the garbage bags ruining my floors and the smoke smell soaking into my drywall. My mother quickly set the plates down and rushed over to me, putting on a bright, completely fake smile. "Lincoln. Honey, you're home early. We thought your flight wasn't landing for another 2 hours. Why are you in my house?" I asked. My voice was dangerously quiet. It lacked any emotion at all. "Now, Lincoln, just listen to us," my father said, stepping forward, using his deep, authoritative dad voice. The voice he always used when he was about to force me to do something I hated. Wyatt lost everything. His apartment is gone. His landlord is threatening to sue him for the fire damage. He has absolutely nowhere to go. We couldn't let him sleep on our tiny couch. He needs space to heal. He needs a nice, comfortable place to get back on his feet. "So you gave him my house," I stated. It wasn't a question. "We didn't give it to him," Penelope chimed in, her voice trembling slightly, trying to play the peacemaker. "We just moved him in. You're never here anyway, Lincoln. You travel for work constantly. You have so much money you can easily afford to stay in a nice hotel or rent a luxury apartment downtown for a while. You have to understand, Wyatt is going through a massive trauma. You need to be a good brother and share what you have." I stood there in the living room I had built with my bare hands, looking at the family that had never given me a single thing in my life, demanding that I surrender everything I had earned. The silence in the room was suffocating. I didn't yell. I didn't throw my suitcase across the room. I just looked at them, letting the sheer audacity of their words hang in the air. Wyatt finally sat up, swinging his dirty sneakers off the glass table, though he left a distinct, greasy smudge behind. He looked at me with those big, pathetic, puppy dog eyes he had perfected over 3 decades of avoiding responsibility. "Come on, Lincoln," Wyatt whined, his voice thick with self-pity. "Don't be like this. I literally watched my entire life burn to ashes yesterday. I have nothing. All my photos, my electronics, my clothes, it's all gone. I'm in a really dark place right now. I was even having some really scary thoughts last night. I need this. I need a place that feels safe and solid. You don't know what it's like to hit rock bottom." He was weaponizing his mental health. It was a classic Wyatt move. Play the ultimate victim so anyone who holds him accountable looks like a monster. Before I could even process the manipulation, my father stepped right into my personal space. Vincent is a tall man, and he likes to use his physical presence to intimidate. "Your brother is suicidal, Lincoln," Vincent said, his voice dropping into a harsh, commanding growl. "He is teetering on the edge. Are you really going to stand there and prioritize some wood floors and a fancy kitchen over your own flesh and blood? You're a single guy. You work 80 hours a week. You don't even have a family to put in this massive house. It's selfish. It's incredibly selfish to hoard a $600,000 property while your brother is suffering." I felt a cold, hard knot form in my chest. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger anymore. It was absolute, chilling clarity. I looked at my father's red, angry face. I looked at my mother, who was nodding along with tears in her eyes, silently agreeing that I was a selfish monster for not wanting a drunk, destructive squatter in my home. And I looked at Wyatt, who was hiding behind them, waiting for them to fight his battles, just like he had his entire life. In that exact moment, a profound realization washed over me. I finally understood, with absolute certainty, that they did not love me. They loved what I could provide. I was not a son or a brother to them. I was an insurance policy. I was a utility. And you don't negotiate with a utility. You just take from it. If I fought them right now, it would be a bloodbath. I would have to call the police. The police would show up, see a family dispute, see that Wyatt had already moved his things in, and they would likely tell me it was a civil matter. I would have to go through a lengthy, expensive legal eviction process that could take months. During those months, Wyatt would undoubtedly destroy my house out of spite. He would rip the cabinets off the walls and burn the hardwood floors, and my parents would help him hide the damage. I couldn't fight them with emotion. I had to fight them like a businessman. I had to treat them exactly the way they treated me, like a transaction. I took a slow, deep breath. I let my shoulders drop. I manufactured a look of weary defeat. Okay, I said quietly. My father blinked, caught off guard by the sudden capitulation. Okay, what? Okay, I repeated, keeping my voice soft and broken. You win. He needs it more than I do. I'll pack my things. The shift in the room was instantaneous and deeply sickening. The thick tension evaporated, replaced immediately by the suffocating, toxic warmth of my mother's conditional love. Penelope let out a loud gasp of relief, rushed forward, and threw her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. Oh, Lincoln, thank you. Thank you so much. I knew you had a good heart. I knew you would do the right thing for your brother. God will bless you for this sacrifice. Vincent clapped me heavily on the back, a wide, triumphant smile spreading across his face. Good man. I'm proud of you, son. This is what family is all about. Stepping up when things get tough. Wyatt didn't get off the couch. He just raised his half-empty beer bottle toward me in a lazy toast. Thanks, bro. I promise I'll take good care of the place. I ignored him. I pulled away from my mother's embrace. If we're going to do this, I said, looking directly at my father, we are going to do it legally and permanently. I am not going to be Wyatt's landlord. I am not going to be responsible for the property taxes, the insurance, or the maintenance while he lives here. If he wants the house, he takes the whole house. Full ownership. My parents exchanged a surprised, greedy look. They had hoped to just guilt me into letting him squat there rent-free, but I was offering them the golden goose itself. Are you serious? Vincent asked, trying to hide his excitement. Completely, I lied flawlessly. I'm done dealing with the upkeep anyway. My company is transferring me to a permanent commercial project down in Texas next month. I was thinking about selling the place regardless. But you need to get a quitclaim deed drawn up immediately. I sign it, Wyatt signs it, and the property transfers to him as is. No warranties, no backsies. It becomes his sole responsibility. My mother was practically vibrating with joy. We already looked into that, she admitted, completely outing her own premeditated greed. Vincent printed a blank quitclaim deed from the county website yesterday, just in case we could convince you to share the equity. Of course they did. They had planned to extort me before my plane even took off. Bring it out, I told him. Vincent rushed out to his car and came back with a manila folder. He pulled out the legal document. I read it over carefully. It was a standard state quitclaim deed, transferring all of my rights, title, and interest in the property over to Wyatt. We need a notary, I said. My mother had her phone out in seconds. Within 45 minutes, a mobile notary public, a quiet woman in her 50s, arrived at the house. We stood around the custom concrete kitchen island I had built. The notary checked my driver's license. She asked me if I was signing this document under my own free will. I looked at my parents, who were watching me with hungry, eager eyes. I looked at Wyatt, who was already imagining himself throwing parties in a $600,000 mansion. Yes, I said clearly. Under my own free will. I took the black pen and signed my name on the line. The notary stamped it. Wyatt practically snatched the pen from my hand and scribbled his signature next to mine, officially accepting the transfer of the property. The notary handed the finalized, notarized document to my father. He held it like he had just won the lottery. I didn't say another word. I walked back to my master bedroom, grabbed my laptop bag, a few expensive watches, and a folder of vital personal documents. I walked back out to the living room, picked up my heavy rolling suitcase, and headed for the front door. "We'll have you over for a nice steak dinner before you move to Texas," my mother called out happily as I opened the door. I walked out into the gray afternoon, got into my truck, and drove away. I watched the house disappear in my rearview mirror. I didn't shed a single tear for the property. I just smiled. A cold, sharp, terrifying smile. I drove straight downtown and checked myself into a premium suite at a high-end business hotel. I tipped the bellhop generously, locked the heavy wooden door behind me, and walked over to the large window overlooking the city's skyline. I opened my laptop, connected to the secure Wi-Fi, and logged into my corporate accounting portal. What my parents didn't understand, and what Wyatt was too stupid to ever realize, is that successful businessmen do not own expensive assets under their own personal names. It is a massive liability. When I bought that derelict Victorian house 2 years ago, I didn't buy it as Lincoln the individual. I bought it under a completely separate limited liability company, an LLC that I created specifically for holding real estate. But it went deeper than that. The renovations I did on the house? The Brazilian walnut floors, the custom concrete, the smart wiring, the structural reinforcements? I didn't pay for that out of my personal checking account. I hired my own primary commercial construction company to do the work. My construction company billed my real estate LLC for the labor, the materials, and the professional contractor fees. Exactly 1 month ago, my accountant and I were restructuring my corporate taxes. Because the real estate LLC hadn't technically paid the construction company for the $500,000 in renovation costs yet, my lawyer advised me to file a formal, legally binding mechanics lien against the property. A mechanics lien is a legal document used in the construction industry. It basically says that if a contractor works on a property and doesn't get paid, the contractor has a legal claim against the house itself. The lien is attached directly to the title of the property. You cannot sell the house, refinance the house, or transfer a clean title to anyone without paying the contractor first. I had placed a massive, legally ironclad mechanics lien of $500,000 on my own house. When a person signs a standard warranty deed, they guarantee that the house is free and clear of all debts and liens. But I didn't sign a warranty deed. I forced my parents to use a quitclaim deed. A quitclaim deed offers absolutely zero protections to the buyer. It simply means whatever I own, I give to you, exactly as it is, including all the garbage, all the problems, and all the debts attached to it. By signing that piece of paper, Wyatt didn't just accept a free $600,000 house. He legally accepted full, undisputed ownership of a property that was encumbered by a $500,000 commercial debt, payable immediately to my construction company. And I knew my parents. I knew they wouldn't just let Wyatt sit in an empty house. He had lost his furniture in the fire. My parents didn't have much liquid cash, but they had excellent credit. I knew, with absolute certainty, that Vincent would take that newly signed deed down to his local credit union, use the house as collateral, and co-sign a home equity line of credit to buy Wyatt new couches, new beds, and a new television. By doing that, Vincent would legally tie his name, his credit score, and his retirement pension directly to Wyatt's financial ecosystem. They thought they had bullied me into submission. They thought they had robbed the ATM. But all they had done was strap themselves to a financial nuclear bomb, and they had just handed me the detonator. I closed my laptop, walked over to the minibar, and poured myself a glass of expensive bourbon. I raised the glass to the city skyline. "Enjoy the house, Wyatt," I whispered to the empty room. The bill is in the mail. Asking viewers to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the city they live in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost. I employed a psychological tactic known as the gray rock method. When dealing with highly toxic, manipulative, or narcissistic people, the worst thing you can give them is a reaction. They feed on drama, arguments, and emotional responses. If you become as boring, unresponsive, and uninteresting as a plain gray rock, they eventually starve. I didn't block their numbers entirely. I just silenced their notifications and routed all of their calls directly to voicemail. I needed to keep a record of their communications for legal purposes. Every few days, I would sit in my quiet hotel room, drink a cup of coffee, and listen to the voicemails my mother left. They were textbook displays of manipulation. First, she would call to sound sweet and motherly, asking how my hotel was and telling me how much Wyatt loved the house. When I didn't respond to that, her next voicemail would be passive-aggressive, complaining that I was being cold and ungrateful for not asking about my brother's recovery. Finally, she would leave angry, bitter messages, telling me that I was a terrible son for abandoning the family and that God would judge my hardened heart. I also kept a close eye on Penelope's social media accounts. She was incredibly predictable. She posted dozens of pictures of the house, my house. She posted pictures of Wyatt sitting in my custom kitchen, smiling like he had won the lottery. The captions were nauseating, so incredibly blessed to help our boy Wyatt move into his stunning new home today. Tragedy struck, but God provided a mansion. Family always takes care of their own. So proud of the strong man he is becoming. In the comments section, a few distant aunts and cousins asked where I was or how Wyatt could afford such a place. My mother replied with vague, condescending comments like, "Lincoln decided to move on. He's always been very independent, perhaps a bit too focused on himself, but we are just focusing on the positive right now." She was openly dragging my name through the mud to make herself look like a savior. I took screenshots of every single post and every single comment, saving them into a secure digital folder on my desktop. On a Tuesday afternoon, I left my hotel and drove to the towering glass and steel building downtown where my corporate law firm was headquartered. I took the elevator to the 40th floor and walked into the pristine, oak-paneled office of my lead attorney, Nathaniel. Nathaniel is a shark. He is a sharply dressed man in his late 40s who specializes in high-stakes corporate litigation, contract disputes, and asset recovery. He doesn't do family law, and he doesn't care about feelings. He cares about contracts, signatures, and crushing the opposition. I sat down in the leather chair across from his massive mahogany desk and handed him the digital file containing the signed quitclaim deed and the documentation for the $500,000 mechanics lien. Nathaniel put on his reading glasses and scanned the documents. A slow, wicked, highly professional smile spread across his face. He looked up at me, taking his glasses off. "Lincoln," Nathaniel said, his voice smooth and calculating. "Tell me you didn't." "I did," I replied evenly. "I just ran a title check on the county database this morning," Nathaniel continued, tapping his expensive pen against the desk. "Your father actually filed the quitclaim deed with the county clerk 3 days ago. It is officially recorded. Wyatt is the legal owner of the property. But more importantly, my paralegal found something else." Nathaniel turned his monitor toward me. "Your father, Vincent, took out a $50,000 personal line of credit from a local bank, using the newly acquired equity in the house as collateral. Because Wyatt has a terrible credit score, Vincent had to co-sign the loan as a primary guarantor." I leaned back in my chair, interlacing my fingers. It was exactly as I had predicted. The trap was perfectly, flawlessly set. Vincent had tied his own financial throat to Wyatt's sinking ship. "Nathaniel," I said, my voice completely devoid of any familial warmth. "It has been more than 30 days since my construction company completed the renovations. The property owner is in default of payment. Execute the lien." Nathaniel didn't waste a single second. Within 48 hours, his paralegal had drafted a massive, legally terrifying stack of documents. It was a formal notice of default and a notice of intent to foreclose. In the state of Washington, when a mechanic's lien is ignored, the contractor holding the lien has the absolute right to force the sale of the property to recover their money. The documents outline the exact amount owed: $500,000 in principal construction costs, plus accumulated interest, late penalties, and attorney fees. The terms were completely non-negotiable. Wyatt had exactly 30 days to produce over $500,000 in liquid cash to clear the debt, or the property would be seized, auctioned off, and he would be legally evicted. I didn't send the documents through the regular mail. I wanted to make absolutely sure they received it, and I wanted to make sure it hit them like a freight train. Nathaniel hired a private, aggressive process server to hand-deliver the massive legal binder directly to the front door. It was a Thursday afternoon. I was back in my corporate office, sitting across the desk from my lead project manager and oldest friend, Cooper. Cooper was one of the few people who knew the entire story. He knew about my parents, he knew about Wyatt, and he knew exactly what I was doing to them. My phone chimed softly on my desk. It was an alert from the smart doorbell camera installed on my front porch. Even though I had handed over the physical keys and the master code to the door, my parents were too technically illiterate to figure out how to wipe my administrative access from the cloud-based camera system. I still had a perfect, high-definition view of the front porch. I opened the app and mirrored my phone screen to the large television monitor mounted on my office wall. Cooper stopped talking and turned his chair around to watch. On the screen, a burly man in a dark polo shirt walked up my wooden porch steps holding a thick, heavy manila envelope. He rang the doorbell. We waited in silence for about 30 seconds. Finally, the heavy oak door swung open. Wyatt stood there, looking like he had just rolled out of bed, wearing my clothes and holding a half-eaten sandwich. "Wyatt," the process server asked clearly. The microphone on the camera picked up the audio perfectly. "Yeah? Who are you?" Wyatt mumbled, chewing his food. "You've been served," the man said smoothly, shoving the heavy envelope directly into Wyatt's chest. Before Wyatt could even process what was happening, the process server turned around and walked briskly down the driveway. Wyatt stood in the doorway, looking incredibly confused. He set his sandwich down on the porch railing and ripped open the envelope. He pulled out the thick stack of legal papers. Cooper and I watched his face in high definition. We watched the exact moment his brain tried to comprehend the legal jargon. We watched his eyes scan down to the bold, capitalized letters that read, "Amount due, $500,000. Notice of foreclosure." All the color completely drained from Wyatt's face. His jaw dropped. He literally stumbled backward a step, leaning against the door frame for support. He dropped the envelope, and the papers scattered across the wooden porch. Cooper let out a low whistle. "Man, you completely broke him." "I didn't break him," I replied, watching the screen as Wyatt frantically fell to his knees to gather the papers. "I just introduced him to the real world." Wyatt ran back inside and slammed the door shut. I closed the app, turned off the monitor, and went back to reviewing my construction blueprints. The bomb had successfully detonated. Now, all I had to do was wait for the shockwave. It took exactly 3 hours for the shockwave to hit my phone. They must have spent those 3 hours frantically reading the documents, Googling the legal terms, and realizing that this wasn't some kind of sick prank. The mechanic's lien was officially registered with the county clerk. It was real, it was terrifying, and it was entirely their fault. At 4:30 in the afternoon, my phone started vibrating on my desk. It didn't stop vibrating for the rest of the evening. Because I had their numbers routed directly to voicemail, I didn't have to listen to the ringing. I just watched the red notification badge on my voicemail app tick upward. 1, 5, 12, 20. They were blowing up my phone with a level of desperation I had never seen before. When I finally left the office and got into my truck to drive back to the hotel, I connected my phone to the Bluetooth stereo and listened to the voicemails chronologically. It was a fascinating psychological study in panic. The first few messages were from Wyatt. He sounded totally disoriented. "Lincoln? Hey man, pick up the phone. Some guy just dropped off a massive lawsuit at the house. It says I owe your company $500,000. There's a huge mistake here, man. Call me back immediately. Tell your lawyers they messed up." An hour later, the tone shifted. Vincent started calling. My father's deep, authoritative voice was completely gone, replaced by a shaky, panicked bark. Lincoln, answer your damn phone. What is this mechanic's lien nonsense? You signed the house over to us. You gave it to your brother. You cannot sue us for a house you gave away. Pick up the phone right now, we are calling the police. They actually thought they could call the cops over a legal corporate debt. It was pathetic. But the final messages, the ones left late in the evening by my mother, were the ones that truly captured the sheer terror of their situation. Penelope wasn't sweet, and she wasn't passive-aggressive anymore. She was screaming in absolute, hysterical panic. Lincoln, please. Please pick up the phone. Vincent took out a $50,000 loan against the house to buy Wyatt furniture. The bank just called us. They saw your foreclosure notice. They're freezing Vincent's accounts. If you foreclose on the house, we still owe the bank $50,000. They are going to take your father's pension, Lincoln. We will be completely ruined. You are destroying our lives over a piece of property. Answer me. I pulled into the hotel parking garage and turned off the engine. I sat in the quiet cab of my truck, listening to my mother weep in genuine terror. They were finally experiencing the exact same sinking, helpless feeling they had forced upon me when they drained my college fund. They were finally feeling the weight of a disaster they couldn't just sweep under the rug. I didn't call them back. I opened my text messages, created a group chat with Penelope, Vincent, and Wyatt, and typed out one single, final response. You demanded his house. You demanded his responsibilities. When you take the asset, you take the debts attached to it. The bill is due in 30 days. Do not contact me again, contact my lawyer. I hit send. Then I permanently blocked all 3 of their numbers. The most entertaining part about toxic families is that their loyalty is entirely conditional. As long as there is an outside target to blame, they will stick together like glue. But the moment the outside target removes himself from the equation and the consequences become real, they immediately turn on each other like starving animals. Without me there to act as the family shock absorber, the alliance between my parents and Wyatt completely shattered. 2 days after the debt notice was delivered, I was sitting in my corporate office having a morning meeting with Cooper. Suddenly, the glass doors to the main lobby swung open loudly. My receptionist, a sharp woman in her 20s, stood up quickly. I looked through the glass walls of my office and saw them. Penelope, Vincent, and Wyatt had bypassed the security desk downstairs and barged directly into my firm. They looked absolutely terrible. Vincent was pale, sweating, and clutching a manila folder. Penelope looked like she hadn't slept in days, her hair a mess, her eyes red and swollen. Wyatt was walking behind them, looking terrified and small. I didn't hide. I stood up, walked out of my office, and stood in the middle of the lobby, crossing my arms over my chest. Cooper stepped out right behind me, his face hard. Lincoln, my mother cried out, practically running toward me. She reached out to grab my arm, but I took a sharp step backward, raising my hand to stop her. You are trespassing on private commercial property, I stated, my voice echoing loudly in the quiet lobby. The other employees in the office had stopped typing and were staring. If you don't leave immediately, I will have Cooper call the police and have you dragged out in handcuffs. Please, son, just give us 5 minutes, Vincent begged. The arrogance was completely wiped from his face. He looked like a broken, terrified old man. We talked to a lawyer yesterday. He told us what this quitclaim deed means. He told us about the mechanic's lien. Lincoln, if you force this sale, the bank will garnish my retirement. We will lose our apartment. We will have absolutely nothing. That sounds like a personal financial problem, Vincent, I said coldly. It has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with you. Penelope screamed, her voice cracking. You tricked us. You set a trap for your own family. You knew this debt was on the house. I didn't trick anyone, I fired back, my voice cutting through her hysterics like a knife. You demanded I give away a $600,000 asset to a man who burns his own life down for fun. You printed the deed. You brought the notary. You rushed the signature because you were so incredibly greedy to steal my property before I could change my mind. You didn't do a title search. You didn't do your due diligence. You just took. And now you have to pay. Wyatt finally spoke up, his voice trembling. Lincoln, please. I'll move out. I'll sign the house back over to you today. Just cancel the debt. No, I said simply. I don't want the house back from you. I want my $500,000. Or I want the property sold at a public auction. Vincent suddenly whirled around and grabbed Wyatt by the collar of his shirt, his face twisting with pure rage. This is your fault. You careless, stupid idiot. If you hadn't burned your apartment down, none of this would be happening. You ruined us. Wyatt shoved his father away. You told me to sign the paper. You told me it was free equity. They were literally fighting each other in the middle of my lobby. It was pathetic. I looked at Cooper and gave him a single nod. Cooper picked up the reception phone and dialed building security. Get out of my building, I ordered them. The next time I see you, it will be in a courtroom. They didn't go down without a fight, but it was the kind of fight a mouse gives a lawnmower. Desperate to save his pension, Vincent drained the last of his meager savings to hire a cheap, aggressive defense attorney. They filed an emergency motion in civil court, attempting to sue me for fraud. Their core argument was that the mechanic's lien was completely fabricated, a fake debt created between my own companies simply to trap Wyatt. The court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. The courtroom was cold, silent, and smelled like old wood and floor wax. I sat at the plaintiff's table beside my lawyer, Nathaniel, wearing a tailored charcoal suit. I felt absolutely nothing. No anxiety, no guilt, no remorse. Just the quiet focus of a project manager watching a demolition proceed exactly according to schedule. My parents and Wyatt sat across the aisle. They looked completely defeated. The stress had visibly aged my father 10 years. Their cheap lawyer stood up and launched into a passionate, dramatic speech about family betrayal. He practically shouted at the judge, claiming that I was a ruthless corporate predator who had weaponized legal loopholes to financially ruin my innocent parents and my traumatized brother. He claimed the $500,000 debt was a total fiction, a paper trail created out of thin air. When he finally sat down, out of breath, the judge, a stern, no-nonsense man in his 60s, turned his attention to our table. Nathaniel stood up. He didn't yell. He didn't use emotional buzzwords. He simply opened a heavy black binder and methodically unleashed a mountain of undeniable, bulletproof corporate data. Your Honor, Nathaniel began, his voice smooth and deadly. The defense's claim of fraud is not only absurd, it is demonstrably false. I am submitting Exhibit A, the official tax returns and banking ledgers for my client's Real Estate LLC and his Primary Construction LLC. As you can clearly see, these are two entirely separate, legally distinct corporate entities. They file separate taxes. They have separate payrolls. Nathaniel handed the massive stack of documents to the bailiff, who passed it to the judge. I am submitting Exhibit B, Nathaniel continued. The itemized, audited construction invoices detailing exactly $500,000 in raw materials, specialized subcontractor labor, and premium architectural fixtures installed in the property over a 2-year period. This was not a fictional debt. This was a massive commercial renovation project. The judge reviewed the detailed invoices, nodding slowly. And finally, Your Honor, I submit Exhibit C, Nathaniel said, projecting the document onto the courtroom monitor. The quitclaim deed. Drafted, provided, and executed by the defendants themselves. My client did not hide the lien. The lien was publicly recorded in the county registry a full 30 days before this deed was signed. The defendants simply chose not to run a basic title search because they were too eager to acquire a free property. In the state of Washington, accepting a quitclaim deed means accepting all attached encumbrances. The law is absolute. The judge looked down at Wyatt's lawyer over his glasses. Counselor, did your clients perform a title search before executing this deed? The cheap lawyer stammered, his face turning red. No, Your Honor. Because it was a family transfer, they assumed. The law does not care what they assumed, the judge interrupted sharply, his voice echoing in the quiet room. The law cares about what is written on the paper. The plaintiff's corporate documentation is flawless. The mechanic's lien is entirely valid, fully documented, and legally binding. The judge picked up his gavel. He looked directly at Wyatt and then at my parents, with an expression of profound pity mixed with disgust. "The court rules in favor of the plaintiff," the judge declared. "The defendant, Wyatt, is ordered to satisfy the debt of $500,000 plus all associated legal fees within 60 days. Failure to comply will result in the immediate foreclosure and public auction of the property. Case closed." The gavel slammed down. It was the loudest sound I had ever heard. It was the sound of a 30-year chain snapping in half. I stood up, buttoned my suit jacket, and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. The next 60 days passed in total silence. I went back to work. I managed my construction sites, I drank coffee with Cooper, and I slept peacefully in my luxury hotel bed every single night. I knew exactly what was happening in the background, though. Through Nathaniel's updates and the public legal records, I watched the financial execution of my family unfold with brutal, mathematical precision. Wyatt, of course, could not produce $500,000. He couldn't even produce $500. He had no job, no savings, and no credit. When the 60-day deadline expired, the heavy machinery of the banking and legal system took over completely. Nathaniel filed the final paperwork, and the county officially seized the property. But the devastation didn't stop with Wyatt. Remember the $50,000 loan Vincent took out to buy Wyatt's new furniture? Because the house was foreclosed on, that loan went immediately into default. The local credit union aggressively went after Vincent, the primary cosigner. To satisfy the debt, the bank heavily garnished Vincent's monthly retirement pension and completely froze his savings accounts. The financial strain was catastrophic. Within 2 months, my parents could no longer afford the rent on their comfortable, upscale apartment. They were forced to break their lease, swallow a massive penalty fee, and move into a tiny, run-down, one-bedroom apartment in a terrible part of the city. Vincent's credit score was utterly obliterated, meaning he would likely never be able to secure a mortgage or a decent auto loan for the rest of his life. As for Wyatt, his eviction day was a masterpiece of poetic justice. Nathaniel sent me the report. The county sheriff's department arrived at the house on a Tuesday morning. Wyatt refused to open the door, so the deputies breached the lock. They found him asleep on the couch he hadn't paid for. They gave him exactly 15 minutes to gather whatever personal belongings he could carry in a few garbage bags, and then they physically escorted him off the premises. Because my parents were now living in a tiny one-bedroom apartment and barely surviving on a garnished pension, they absolutely refused to let Wyatt move in with them. For the first time in his entire 35 years of life, the golden child was told no. His safety net had been completely vaporized. He was forced to move into a cheap, dirty residential motel on the outskirts of town, bouncing from couch to couch, completely cut off from the endless stream of money and forgiveness he had exploited his entire life. They had sacrificed everything to protect him, and in the end, it destroyed all of them. The house, my beautiful, custom-built, $600,000 fortress, was now vacant, locked down by the county, and scheduled to be sold at the public foreclosure auction on the courthouse steps. It was finally time to go get my keys back. The public foreclosure auction took place on a rainy Tuesday morning on the concrete steps of the county courthouse. It was a chaotic scene, filled with aggressive real estate investors, flippers, and bank representatives holding clipboards. I stood near the back of the crowd, wearing a heavy waterproof jacket, holding a thermos of hot coffee. Nathaniel stood right beside me, holding a legally certified document that essentially gave me a superpower in this exact situation. Because my construction company held the primary, senior mechanics lien on the property, I didn't actually have to bring cash to buy the house. In a foreclosure auction, the primary lien holder is allowed to use their own debt as a credit bid. That meant I could bid up to $500,000 using the debt Wyatt owed me, without actually spending a single real dollar from my bank account. The auctioneer called out the address of my property. A few investors murmured, knowing it was a highly valuable, newly renovated asset. The bidding started at $200,000. A guy in a cheap suit raised his paddle. $250, another investor called out. I let them fight over it for a minute, driving the price up to $300,000. When the crowd went quiet, waiting for the auctioneer to drop the hammer, I simply raised my hand. "For 100,000, I said calmly. The crowd turned to look at me. The other investors shook their heads, realizing the profit margin was gone. They dropped their paddles. "Going once, going twice. Sold," the auctioneer declared, slamming his gavel against the podium. And, just like that, using the very debt my family tried to run away from, I legally repurchased my own $600,000 home for absolutely nothing. The title was cleared of all other encumbrances, the quitclaim deed was erased from history, and the property was transferred back into my LLC. It was officially mine again. 2 days later, I drove my truck down the familiar, tree-lined driveway. The gray clouds had parted, and the Seattle sun was actually shining against the dark exterior paint. I didn't use a smart code this time. I used the heavy brass key the county had given me. I pushed the oak door open and stepped inside. The house was completely empty. The bank had repossessed all the expensive furniture my father had foolishly bought. The massive living room echoed with my footsteps. I walked slowly through the house, doing a visual inspection. Wyatt had lived there for a few months, and true to form, he had left his mark. There were a few deep scratches on the Brazilian walnut floors where he had dragged heavy boxes. The custom white concrete kitchen island had a few ugly stains from spilled wine and unwashed dishes. The master bathroom smelled faintly of mildew. 6 months ago, seeing those scratches would have sent me into a blind rage. But standing there now, running my hand over the stained concrete, I didn't feel angry at all. I felt a deep, profound sense of ownership. I am a builder. Scratches can be sanded out. Concrete can be polished and resealed. Walls can be repainted. I had all the money, all the skills, and all the time in the world to fix the minor cosmetic damage he had caused. The house was wounded, but the foundation was completely intact. I immediately called my security contractor. Within 4 hours, a crew arrived at the house. We completely removed the old smart lock system. In its place, I had them install a commercial-grade, biometric fingerprint scanner wired directly to a military-grade encryption server. There were no physical backup keys anymore. There were no master override codes that could be kept in a safe. The only way to open that front door was with my physical fingerprint. My fortress was finally impenetrable. 3 months passed. The transition from summer into early autumn painted the trees around my property in brilliant shades of orange and gold. I had completely restored the house to its original, flawless glory. The floors were perfectly polished, the kitchen was pristine, and my life had settled into a quiet, deeply satisfying rhythm. I thought the ghost of my family had been entirely exorcised from my life, until I walked out to my mailbox one Tuesday afternoon. Mixed in with the electric bill and some contractor catalogs was a thick, pale blue envelope. The handwriting on the front was immediately recognizable. It was elegant, cursive, and deeply familiar. It was from my mother. I walked back into my kitchen, tossed the rest of the mail on the concrete island, and stared at the blue envelope. I didn't open it immediately. I made myself a cup of black coffee, sat down on one of the leather bar stools, and finally tore the top of the envelope off. Inside was a 4-page, handwritten letter. I unfolded the thick paper and began to read. It was a masterpiece of narcissistic manipulation and revisionist history. Penelope didn't apologize for demanding my house. She didn't apologize for the vile things she had said to me in my corporate lobby. Instead, she spent the first 3 pages completely throwing Wyatt under the bus. She wrote about how Wyatt had deceived them, how he had manipulated their parental love, and how he was entirely to blame for the horrific financial situation they were now in. She complained bitterly about their tiny, depressing apartment and how Vincent's health was failing due to the stress of his garnished pension. And then, on the final page, she made her pivot. "Lincoln, my sweet, reliable boy," she wrote. "Your father and I realize now that we made a terrible mistake trusting your brother. You were right all along. You are the strong one. The successful one. The one who actually knows how to build things. We are struggling so badly, Lincoln. Our apartment is terrible, and the neighborhood is unsafe. You have that massive, beautiful house all to yourself. It's too much space for one person. We are your parents. Please, let us come stay in the guest wing. We will be quiet. We won't bother you. Family needs to forgive and forget. We need you to save us. I stopped reading. I looked out the massive bay windows of my kitchen, watching the autumn leaves slowly drift down onto the perfectly manicured lawn. They hadn't learned a single thing. Even after absolute financial ruin, they still viewed me as nothing more than a resource to be consumed. They didn't miss their son, they missed the comfort my money provided. They wanted to move into the exact same house they had tried to steal from me, under the guise of forgiveness. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel the old, familiar sting of rejection. I just felt incredibly tired of their endless, parasitic drama. I stood up, walked over to my home office, and turned on the heavy-duty paper shredder I kept next to my desk. I didn't write a response. I didn't call her to yell at her. I just fed the 4-page letter into the machine. I watched the sharp steel blades grab the thick blue paper and violently pull it down, shredding her apologies, her excuses, and her demands into thousands of tiny, completely illegible ribbons. The machine hummed quietly, digesting the last physical tie I had to my past. There is a massive psychological difference between being abandoned by your family and actively choosing to cut them off. Society tells us that blood is thicker than water, that we owe our parents our sanity and our wealth simply because we share DNA. But that is a lie designed to keep toxic cycles alive. Cutting off toxic blood relatives is not a sin. It is the ultimate act of self-preservation. I turned the shredder off. The room was perfectly silent. The boundary was permanently set, and no one would ever cross it again. It was a Saturday evening, exactly 1 year since the fire that started it all. The weather was perfect, a cool, crisp evening that required a light jacket, but felt incredible against the skin. I was standing on the expansive wooden deck of my backyard, holding a pair of heavy metal tongs. The rich, mouth-watering smell of charred cedar, garlic, and premium ribeye steaks floated through the air, mixing with the faint scent of pine trees from the surrounding woods. "Those steaks need about 2 more minutes, Lincoln," Cooper called out, walking onto the deck and handing me an ice-cold bottle of imported beer. "I know how to grill a steak, Coop," I laughed, taking a long, refreshing drink from the bottle. I looked past Cooper, through the open sliding glass doors, and into my brightly lit, completely immaculate home. The house was filled with the sound of genuine laughter. 3 of my lead engineers and their wives were sitting around my dining room table, sharing a massive bottle of red wine and telling stories about a recent disastrous concrete pour on a job site. This was my family now. Not people bound to me by the biological accident of birth, but people I had chosen. People who respected hard work, who didn't view me as a walking ATM, and who actually added value and joy to my life instead of constantly trying to drain it. I occasionally heard rumors through the grapevine about the people I used to call my parents. Vincent was reportedly working as a part-time greeter at a massive hardware store just to make ends meet, his pride completely shattered. Penelope had stopped posting on social media entirely, unable to maintain the illusion of a perfect, wealthy family. Wyatt was completely off the radar, bouncing between minimum-wage jobs and cheap motels, entirely abandoned by the parents who had once worshipped the ground he walked on. They were living out the exact consequences of the choices they made. And for the first time in my 32 years on this earth, I didn't feel a single ounce of responsibility to save them from themselves. I pulled the perfectly seared steaks off the grill and placed them on a thick wooden cutting board to rest. I leaned against the heavy wooden railing of the deck and looked up at the darkening sky. I had built a fortress. When the invaders came, disguised as family, holding out their hands and demanding the keys, I didn't surrender. I used the very structure of the fortress to crush them. I had burned the toxic bridge to the ground, and in the light of that fire, I found my absolute freedom. There is a peace that comes from knowing you are entirely self-reliant. A peace that comes from walking into a beautiful home that belongs solely to you, locking a door that no one else has the code to, and finally, truly resting. Am I wrong for letting my parents face financial ruin over a debt they willingly took on to protect my brother, or should I have warned them before the trap snapped shut? Thanks for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please consider hitting that subscribe button and turning on notifications so you never miss a story.